What's up, tribe? Today we're continuing the discussion about running for fat loss, and we're going to be talking about advanced programming methods. Most people are training too repetitively after the preparation phase to get a really good result without hurting themselves. Let's go a little bit deeper into that today.
What's up, everyone? Across the table, you just heard from Rad Baumeister. Next to me is the effervescent Phil White. And behind the camera is Richie. Together we are Unity Gym. I'm, of course, Yanni Baumeister. If you want to know how we turn driven people into superhumans, you can download our blueprints from the description if you're on the podcast or on YouTube, or you can go to our website. For everyone else, they're there. They're amazing. And they will teach you lots, hopefully. How is everyone?
Bubbly. Yeah.
Bubbly.
Like a Baraka tablet today. Effervescent. I like it.
That's a new one, eh?
Yeah, it's good. I'm enjoying every new adjective is always enjoyable. But yeah, happy to be back talking about running, passion project of mine. So
yeah, we lined up a good show for Phil today. This is an absolute cracker. We usually have 3 talking points for these shows, but today we've got 4.
Boom.
Yeah.
Oh, stop it. I just realised that.
Yeah.
This is definitely going to break the matrix.
Yeah, that's right. So we've got a lot. We've got a lot to get through, and we want to first ask the question of the day, and maybe someone can type this in for me. I want to know those of you out there who are avid runners, who are a little bit more experienced beyond the beginner level. I want to know how you're varying your running program. Give us your favorite sort of program variables. Do you just go for distance runs, steady state cardio all the time? Do you try to tip into your anaerobic system, energy system? Do you use intervals? Do you use hills? Do you use undulations? What do you do to increase your fitness and get and sort of solve the diminishing returns problem once you get super fit?
It's a long question of the day to type out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What program variables are you using to gain fitness beyond beginner level?
All right, put it up. So you guys don't need to type it.
Legend.
Oh, stop
What
it.
can't he do?
Oh, look at Richie.
Nice.
Look at him go. Yeah, so if you're on the live stream, guys, and you are a runner, we want to hear from you. We want to know and share your experiences with us. Even if you're not super experienced, share your experiences with running if you've ever sustained an injury or a running injury or anything like that.
I think that is such a good thing to talk about. It is something that I've done so poorly in the past and come a long way in changing. And I did kind of give a bit of a backstory of this when I was playing Ultimate Frisbee competitive for 11 years. Like our training used to be, run 5Ks as fast as you can every time. And I remember there was a couple of years ago, there was this guy who played for one of the Newcastle teams named Chili, and he was the closest thing to a human puppy I've ever seen, where he just loved Frisbee because he would just throw it as far as he can, he'd chase after it, and he'd throw it back as far as he can, chase after it again. And yeah, he's seriously been had been doing the same running routine of run 5Ks 3 days a week as fast as he can, trying to beat his PB every single time. It's oh my God, what a miserable thing to do, because it's just so you're never going to win, because you just keep pushing yourself every single time, and sure enough, injury struck, and it didn't end too.
I think that's an issue that a lot of people have with training in general. Definitely, it took me a long time to understand that is not a great way to train, where every single training session is this idea that you should match or beat the best thing that you can do, and you do these kind of ramp loadings and these periodization cycles, and that it's actually a really good thing to do, where some of the training sessions that you do are intended to be at a lower intensity than what you did before.
Yeah, but it's often one of those, it's so easy to see how it happens, because when you start off you don't have heaps of knowledge, and so you're often it takes a bit of motivation to get started on this sort of new habit, and so you're what can I kind of lock onto here, and getting a PB is quite a motivating thing. So you're sweet, okay, that's my motivation. I'm going to try and get that each time. And so you kind of fall into this trap where you the reason you got running is that's all I know about. So I'm just going to try and keep beating this thing. And it's only when you start adding in these different program variables, understanding the bigger picture, and start thinking about how it fits into the rest of your life, and then program appropriately, that you can start to bring in those other motivating factors. And it's just
and it's funny because the
knowledge is power.
The further we go down this road in our professions, I'm talking about the 4 people in this room here being in the fitness industry, And the more people that we speak to that are at an elite level in their area of the fitness industry, so for example, Joachim with flexibility recently and Bass with powerlifting recently, something that is a recurring theme is that these experts are telling us that they do less to achieve more. Like Joachim is all about more recovery for stretching, and Bass is talking about the way that he trains now compared to the way that he trained 10 years ago. There's so much more recovery, and it's not about just doing max lifts all the time, and he's lifting like so much more than he's ever lifted before, you know?
I don't know. Here's the thing, though. It's very easy to and I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I genuinely don't know the answer. But what I do know for sure is that to get to an elite level is a lot of work, and to maintain it and make improvements there, the training changes, over time. Like setting when you're not super strong and you're not squatting 400 kilos, you have to do more volume, You obviously have to do more volume at 200 kilos than you do at 400 kilos, and you have to do more volume at 100 kilos than you have to do at 200 kilos. So it's this forever sort of changing goalpost, I think, as your level of experience evolves. And so...
But all those do come down to, like, the reason why rest is so important is because you are pushing yourself to an intensity that gets a change, instead of kind of getting, if you're never recovering, you're never able to push yourself to the point where you're going to get adaptation, and if you do, you're probably going to break down and get an injury because of it.
So just very quickly before we go further, I want to paint a bit of a picture, because this is very common. We've all got friends like this. I'm not quite at this level with running yet, but I do know a lot of people who are. The typical journey of a runner is very intoxicating. Once you break beyond the beginner level, which we spoke about yesterday, where you've done your preparation phase, where you've started to tidy up your nutrition to a level that supports your goals with running and things like that, and you start to experience a heightened state of fitness and physical preparedness, you often feel like you can run forever. And at that point, your body becomes much more efficient at metabolizing fat. So it's a little bit, so essentially losing weight becomes just a matter of running a little bit more regularly and running a little bit further. And most people, that's what they do. They just go, okay, well, I've got an hour today, or I've got 2 hours today, so I'm going to go for an hour run or a 2 hour run. And there's not a lot of logic put behind it. They just run for as long as the time permits. And then they start to do it as often as the time permits. And you start to get more and more diminishing returns in fitness and in body composition improvement from your runs, because your body adapts more and more and more to steady state running. And so you do it more and more frequently to get the same results. And at the end of a year or so, not so many people I know, I talk to them and they say, I'm just loving my running. I'm running 7 days a week now. And I'm like, oh my God, like what variability is in that? Do you just do the same? Yeah, I've got this amazing run I do around the foreshore, and then I cut across the bridge, and it's about 16 kilometers, and it's just so good, and I love it, and it takes me 2 hours. And they do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And then a year or two later, they've put on 30 kilos, and I'm like, what the hell happened? Oh man, I got so many injuries. Or, at some point you get such diminishing returns that is not as motivating anymore. And then another very common problem is that you get extremely annoying overuse injuries, in the knees, the hips, the ankles, shin splints, Achilles strains, things like that, because of a lack of variability and too much consistency, too much frequency, too much repetitive running. And that's what we want to sort of talk about today, because it's
that bucket and tap analogy that I use for that load and capacity issue, where if you've gone from not running to then having, which your bucket is going to be a certain size, so your capacity for your structures to handle running are going to be quite small. And then if you start just turning that tap on until you're running 7 days a week, then you can see that bucket's going to have a really hard time dealing with it. And that's where people usually go wrong with starting a running program, is just being like, okay, I've got motivation to run, so now all I'm going to do is run.
Yep.
And it's so key to think, how am I going to build this bucket? I'm going to do it by running a little bit, but I'm also going to get it by strengthening and technique as well.
Yep. And there's so many variables that you can start to play with at this point. The problem is, if you go to the point where you're experiencing overuse injuries, the thought of doing hill sprints on a strained Achilles becomes just impossible. And so that person just thinks, okay, all I can do is just do my run that I know, because I can manage the pain at that run and that consistency and this and that, and they sort of don't break out of the you know, that repetitive nature, you know. And don't get me wrong, like I think running can become like any exercise. When you start to get really good at it, it becomes quite addictive, you know.
Definitely.
Because you feel incredible when you do it and you feel awful when you don't do it, you know. But today we want to talk about how you can start creating a bit of variability in your programming to avoid that repetitive nature, and also to really level up your fitness, go beyond the sort of above average level, you know.
It's a beast of a thing, this fitness thing, isn't it? It's really unfair that there's so much, you know, thought and preparation and stuff that has to go into it to stop yourself from getting injured. Like, you should be able to just make that decision one day that you're going to start exercising, and then just doing the thing is enough to get it done. It's just so unfair that all this rubbish happens, you know, to our bodies.
I look at it like this, because injuries are something that are just so unavoidable throughout life, but I much prefer to inflict them on myself as opposed to have lifestyle do it for me.
Totally.
You know, because it's manageable when you do it yourself. If you get injured, if you get shin splints or runner's knee from running too much, you know that the variable that caused it. Whereas when you wake up one day and your back hurts and you've got no answer to it, it's like, oh well, I'll change my mattress. I'll go and spend $4,000 on a new mattress. I went through this process, by the way. Go and spend $4,000 on a new mattress and about $1,000 trying different pillows to get it right, and then the pain subsides for a few weeks, and then it comes back with a vengeance, and then you go and spend thousands of dollars on treatment that just, you know, prevents the pain for a day or two or maybe a week. It subsides and then comes back, and you know, that is a horrible existence to be in.
Totally.
You know.
So let's jump into this, because this is let's let Phil really have a go at this, because we've stitched him up by not allowing him to be a part of two of these really good discussions. So you know, our first point here, Phil, you know, let's let you open up for this one. How to use distance, intensity, undulations, and intervals to build a running program.
Yeah, I think this is such a good thing to wrap your head around, because just like in the gym where we, you know, we've talked at length about different programming principles, about sets, reps, intensity, volume, rest, all those things. If you haven't heard, go back a few weeks and we did a really good discussion on this. And yeah, the way that people approach running is off like the equivalent of in the gym being like, all right, I can lift 40 kilos for 5 reps. And so you do it 5 reps, and then the next day in a bench press, for example, and then you come back and you bench press another like 40 kilos for 5 reps, and then you keep doing it, and then you're like, oh, okay, I can, you know, do it a few more times now. And so you just keep bench pressing 40 kilos, as many reps as you can, and then like either you don't progress or you break. And that's kind of what people do with running, where it's like, okay, I'm going to go out for a run, I'm going to do my same run, and I'm just going to like keep pushing it and go harder and harder. No variability in what you're doing, no change in any of these factors. So I think it's so key to try and get that mindset into your you know, your fitness training. So it can be running, but this also applies to swimming, cycling, you know, I don't know if you go to the elliptical machine on the gym. Like, think about how you can change the variabilities to get different responses, because we've talked a lot about energy systems and how important the understanding of how different energy systems work in the body. And so what that means is like the glycolytic system, so the sugar burning system, the fat burning system, the immediate energy system, so the phosphocreatine system, and how all those work together. So if you only ever train one system, so that aerobic system going for a long run, you're going to get like a certain amount of change, and then that's going to plateau. But then if you say, you know, you're like, oh, I've been running a lot, maybe I'll like, you know, play some sport, and then you try and sprint, you play a bit of beach volleyball on the beach, and suddenly like, you know, you do a few sprints back and forth, and you're absolutely cooked because your aerobic system's good, but your immediate energy system and your glycolytic system is not at all conditioned. Yep. So it's so important to understand that like there's all these different systems at play, and you only get results if you train specifically for those things.
Yep.
So this is where it kind of comes back to goals again. So if you do have a specific athletic pursuit, a sport that you're training for, think about what's involved in that sport and think about the systems you need to get that. So if you just want to be an ultramarathon runner, then, you know, long steady state stuff, fine. But that doesn't mean that, but with long distance stuff, so personal story for me, it was last year or the year before, I did a trail half marathon. So it was a off-road half marathon. I did it with a really excellent charity group here in Australia called Can2. It's also how I learnt to swim, where basically they get you ready for a specific goal event. and they take you through like 12 weeks of training for it, and then the actual event as well. So I did a trail half marathon, which was in Bobbin Head, which is a very popular cycling spot because it's bloody hilly. So this trail event was 22 Ks of basically like up and down, up and down, up and down through the bush. And trail running, as I've talked about before, is just like if you can do any type of running, like try trail running, because it's just such a beautiful place to run. But I digress. Anyway, but the training for that, they take you through a systematic training, and it didn't involve just, hey, let's go out and run like 22 Ks every week, or as close to 22 Ks as you can. What we did was on a Wednesday, we'd go down to underneath the Harbour Bridge, we'd do a hill sprint, like stairs and hill sprint session, where it would be like you'd be absolutely gasping for air, because they're like, even though we're training for an event that takes about 2 hours to run, it was 45 minutes of absolutely go as hard as you can, sprint up these stairs.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it's the worst, and then it kind of becomes the best, and then it becomes the worst again. Like,
there's another thing that's occurring there which I think is really important too, is that once you start to do a lot of steady state and you're doing a fairly comfortable course that you're familiar with, you stop progressing your lactate buffering and your body's ability to push through that discomfort level and all that sort of thing, which if you ever get bum steered and thrown onto a different circuit or course that's got much greater undulations or hills or something like that, you get found wanting, because you haven't condition those the lactate systems and the muscles' ability to just push through that burn that you experience when you start to peak the muscles out. You know?
And so this is what this stair session was all about, because we knew our goal was run this Bobbin Head half marathon, and that was some of the steepest hills I've ever seen in my life. It was a joke. But so like, if you're just going to be running on the flat for like 20K, you're not going to get anywhere near it. So
that's right.
Yeah, so we used the it was stair sprints, and then there was is that one next to Luna Park, where it's like those set of stairs, and then there's like the hill back up to.
I know it well.
Oh yeah, so it is
down near the park behind the train tracks there. Yanni and I used to do that once a week.
Yeah, so it's an absolute beast. So that was, and if you think about what that's doing, is not only is it now training your immediate energy systems, it's also much more of a strength stimulus to your body and your arms and your legs, as well as a fitness stimulus. So you're using that glycolytic system, that sugar burning system, which is the same sort of system we're more training when doing hard stuff, interval stuff in the gym, which means that we're going to have stronger legs. It means that the hills will be relatively easier, so that when you go out into steady state, now you're working at a relatively lower intensity than your max. So if you can train that max intensity, just like we do in the gym with weights, so if you go from bench pressing 40 to 60 kilos, suddenly 40 will now be like only 2/3 of your max weight, so you'll be able to do it for many more reps. So you got to take exactly the same gym principles, put them into how you're thinking about your running training.
Yep. So just quickly to recap, guys, before we move on to the next point, which is starting to experiment with a bit of nutrition intervention. We want to get variability in your training program. Once you break beyond that beginner level and you have conditioned your body, you've done your preparation phase, all of the connective tissues, you've been doing nice, gentle, steady state, walking, running, eventually you'll get that to jogging. And that conditioning phase can take a few months, like you just really take it easy for a couple of months and do
build
your bucket. That's exactly right.
Build that capacity.
Then from that point on, the better thing to do is not just to run all the time repetitively. The better thing to do is to start putting some variability in. And we love stair sprints. We love hill sprints. We love playing with different distances. 50 meters as fast as you possibly can up a really steep hill is going to really test that immediate energy system. Whereas 200 meters on a flat grass is going to test a slightly different energy system, and you can play with different variables like that and build programs. And then
think about the, like, if you are doing an event, and events can be really just like a great motivator. Try and think about what you'll need for that event. So, if it is a flat race, then maybe the stair sprints aren't as directly related to it, but what you could do is on your flat run, start doing, okay, I'm going to do like 15 seconds on, 45 seconds off. So every minute you've got 15 seconds of sprint, and then 45 seconds, that'll become very tiring very soon. But you might draw that out, but think about how you can add in this variation just so you're going to actually get
absolutely. And then from that point on, I think the icing on the cake is how you start to recover from your running, to start to bring a little bit of balance in. And I know that this is the area that Rad would be, chomping at the bit to try and encourage people to do. Running isn't the be all and end all, of course, and that, like, we're not even running experts here. Everything that I've learned from running has come from this series of books that's sitting in front of us, Law of Running, and it basically, at some point you've got to understand, and I think from the very base level, beginner level, you've got to understand that there is a real need for a bit of balance. So despite you wanting to be an elite level runner, you should be including some strength and flexibility training into your routine. You should be including some sort of a recovery routine, and you need to make sure that you're treating your running just like someone would treat a gym workout, with that sort of variability, with that recovery, with that, I guess, longevity in mind.
Look, I think one of the biggest issues that people have when it comes to running is the specialization disease. And, I suffered from it up until 5 years ago, when I kind of feel like I had the veil lifted from my eyes when, I defined myself as a martial artist, and so I didn't do anything outside of martial arts. And I think a lot of people that love running, they define themselves as runners, like they say that's what they are. And the, overuse injuries, I'm quoting Ido Portal here, but man, that dude has done a lot of research on this stuff. Ido's quote is, overuse injury is a specialist disease. It's something that comes from specialization. And if you just vary what you do, which, as Phil's talked about, you can vary the type of running you do within there, but then, you also need to do some different types of things as well with your time. And at the most basic level, it would be some stretching and strength training as well. Yep. And if you at least take that approach, I think that you're going to find that you. Yeah,
and I'd really highlight the strengthening over stretching, because it's such a common thing. You see runners being like, my Achilles is really tight. It's really I just know I haven't been doing enough stretching. Or you see the runners out there doing hardcore static hamstring stretches, just clearly in a bunch of discomfort, and they think, I just haven't been stretching enough. And I've had my rant about stretching being this magical cure-all that people seem to think is, and it's so not the case. Especially in running, it's very much a strength issue. People totally run. Their capacity is not matched with load, and therefore the muscles get stressed, get spasmy, get tighten up to be protective, and then people think, just got to stretch my way out of this problem again, and it just does not work.
And that's a really good point, because I should clarify that when I say stretching, what I mean by stretching is often not what people think stretching is. When I say stretching, I mean things like loaded eccentrics, loaded isometrics, a whole bunch of different stuff. Whereas, usually when runners say stretching, they think hold a stretch for 15 seconds and then do the other side.
I think the ultimate recovery program for a runner who's running all the time, is that you would potentially, if you're running 5 days a week, I would probably drop to 3 days a week of running, and then the other 2 days a week that you're exercising, I'd be in the gym doing a mix of strength and flexibility training. And you wouldn't be doing it to break records. You're doing it to condition your body, to hit it with a different stimulus, a little bit of variability, so that you're balancing the body out. And I guarantee you, by dropping those 2 days of running, you're probably going to end up getting better results on the 3 days that you do run.
Sure.
You're going to avoid serious injury. You're going to avoid annoying injury, or you'll have a greater chance of doing so. And your aim on those 2 days in the gym is to, recover from running and prepare your body a little bit better for the running that's to come, So you're not in the gym trying to break PBs.
You don't want to wipe yourself out for your running session, but you're just giving your body enough conditioning that your capacity will increase and you'll be able to handle
that's right. And you target the areas that are at most problematic for runners: ankles, knees, hips, even shoulders, depending on how good you are at running.
I've been very fortunate in my work as a massage therapist to work with some of the best runners in Australia. One guy's won the Australian Marathon, and then a bunch of ultra marathon runners. So they do crazy stuff that I could go through it all because it fascinates me. But what my favorite is this lady and her friend who just for fun ran across Iceland. Like they didn't tell anyone about it. They didn't weren't raising money. They just ran from the north to the south of Iceland, which is like some of the most rugged terrain in the world. And they did it, which is 570 Ks, and they just did it totally self-supported, mental. But all of these runners have one thing in common, and that's their hunched over, their shoulders are so forward, they run like this. And one of the key things that I worked with a running coach down in Canberra for a while for my own running form, because I had some funky technique stuff going on, and fixing that made all the world of difference. And one of the biggest things was about getting your kind of shoulders and your arm swing right. And if you're tucked in like this, it becomes that can have real flow-on effects as well to the rest of your life. But I'd be really keen before we finish to try and get to this little nutrition piece.
This is
4 points in a
I know. This is probably we're lucky. We haven't got anyone answering the question of the day, so we don't have to discuss that. So we still theoretically have 5 minutes on this last point. And this last point, I think, is something that everyone should get to a point where they're doing. This is the final frontier, I believe, in health, which is nutritional experimentation to increase metabolic flexibility. And, just to sort of preface this a little bit, Rad and myself are both quite, we've experimented quite deep with intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating for this purpose. We even did a period last year or the year before where we were testing our blood ketone levels every day. We've got the proper testing kits where you test your blood, not your urine. So it's a lot more accurate.
Hell of a lot harder to get into ketosis than what a lot of people seem to think.
Yeah, that's right.
Wasn't easy.
Yeah, and it was a lot easier for Rad than myself in the end. Like we'd do the same fast on the same nutrition, and he'd have higher blood ketones than me when we tested the blood. So, very frustrating.
Superior genetics, right there.
Superior in every way. But this is something that I think it can really, really take you beyond. So why don't you share yesterday's story with you and Alex again, just very quickly, to give some context on what it means to be more metabolically flexible.
Yeah, so basically the idea of, my mate Alex and I went for a big... well, it wasn't even a big cycle. It was around 50 60 Ks. And he did collapse. He collapsed on we'd got like 45 Ks in. We'd done some serious hills, but
Alex Allen?
Yeah. And he fell like into the grass and was like, he's like cramping on both sides, and he the only way he could kind of help the cramp, I was like, oh, what do you want me to do? And he's like, oh, just keep cycling my legs. I'm like, mate, you've just been cycling. He's like on the on his back, like cycling. I'm there like holding his feet, trying to keep his legs cycling. Anyway, so this is a guy who's very strong. He does CrossFit. He does like serious lifting, but he wasn't adapted to long distance hilly cycling, and particularly he wasn't metabolically adapted. And so what I mean by that is, I left. I had a black coffee and then went off on the ride, and he was like slamming down some protein bars and a couple pieces of fruit. And then by the time we'd got maybe like 20 Ks, hilly Ks, but he was like, I am desperate for some food. Like, I didn't get to eat a proper breakfast. I'm like, mate, you just had like
so many. And you're going on a black coffee.
Yeah. And so he's like, oh, please, I can't go on much longer. And I was like, okay, all right. So we went to this like beautiful fruit shop and got some nice stuff, and like, and then 20 minutes later, or 20 Ks later again, he's like, when's lunch? I was like, what? But yeah, basically it's something that I've done is like when I cycle to work here, which is like 13 hilly Ks each way. I just have a black coffee, I get riding. But I've been doing a lot of intermittent fasting for years, and I've trained my body to run quite well fasted on whenever I do any cardio exercise, it's almost always fasted. And when we talked about energy systems before, the glycolytic system, the aerobic system, so your fat burning system, your sugar burning system, basically, you need to give your body time to adapt to that. And being able to run fasted means that you're going to be using much more of your fat burning system. So if you can try and think like we've been talking about with everything else, like start exposing your body to being able to manage that system. Because if you start off and you go too hard, you'll be like Alex, where you'll be a heap on the floor.
And this is often one of the reasons why an overweight person who starts an exercise regime gets very sick initially when they exercise, because their body is, and they can't even move into that fat metabolization stage. because they're just not very efficient. Now, there's a caveat to this, which people seem to get very confused on, which is that, okay, well, if I shift to an all-fat and protein diet, like the Atkins diet or a ketogenic diet, then I'm going to lose more weight. And the problem with that is that the more you eat of one type of macronutrient, the more efficient you become at metabolizing that and using that as fuel. So if you are raised on carbohydrates, which most of us are, we eat breakfast cereals and toast and things like that all the time, and lots of bread and lots of carbs, then we become really efficient at using that as our primary fuel source. And vice versa. If you switch to a fat diet, high fat diet, then over time you become very efficient at using that as your primary fuel source. It doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to get skinnier. You know, what you have to do is test both. You have to become what's referred to as metabolically flexible. So you have days of the week where you're consuming predominantly fats, and you have days of the week where you're consuming predominantly carbohydrate. The best thing to do is to mix it up and to be metabolically flexible, so that when you do go on a ride and then also to practice fasting.
Yeah.
You know,
it helps with not only your fitness but also like your mood, because people who are so tied to tethered to the riding the wave of the glycolytic system, like when I used to have like a breakfast cereal in the morning when I was a kid, like I would be grumpy by like 10:30, and then 100%. I'd be like fading by
100%. And that's the thing that I've found the most empowering about experimentation with fasting, different types of fasting protocols. And a lot of people sort of get it a bit confused. Most of us are just doing time restricted eating. Fasting, intermittent fasting, is abstinence from food for 24 or more hours, and most people don't do that. But when we do even a 16/8 time restricted eating regime, we become very untethered from food very quickly after a short adaptation period, which for some people is only a few days, for some people it might be a week or two. You untether from food, and you don't end up experiencing those wild waves of nausea, cold sweats, mood swings, hunger pains, all that sort of stuff. It just goes. Yeah. And that's, I think, the most empowering thing. I can comfortably exercise after a 24-hour fast. Like I can comfortably, the longest I've fasted is 72 hours, and it didn't interfere with my exercise whatsoever. And I've got a client here who Phil's now training, who PB'd on the deadlift after a 5-day fast. That's Neil. You know, like there's a lot of proof to indicate that once you get through that adaptation period, you know, you can do incredible things on a fasted state. Your body, if we were designed to need to eat every few hours, we would never have evolved to where we are today. Okay, that's just simple fact. We would never have survived. Yep. Humans can go for days on end without food, you know, and still chase down an animal and kill it, you know. So.
Just quick medical caveat, if you do have blood sugar issues like diabetes or anything where you really need to manage blood sugar tightly, definitely, and with all this stuff, you know, consult a medical professional before you
do it with the support of your doctor.
But yeah, and with all of this stuff, like this, you know, this all is about adaptation. So you only got to that point after, you know, starting small with like the 16/8 and then building up to sort of the 3-day stuff. So slowly like work your way into it, and don't go like hell for leather, like knock yourself out and then think, it's not for me. Like you've just got to gradually expose yourself to everything like this. And I think a really great kind of running example before we just quickly wrap this up is Zach Bitter, who's a ZACHBITTER for those playing at home. He's an ultra marathon runner in the US, and he has the in 2015 he had the US record for the 100-mile running world championships, where you're basically running around a track like 400 times or something insane. And he's completely ketogenic, so 0 carbs, you know, none of that kind of classic old school carb loading, you know, a whole bunch of pasta the night before. Like this guy did this like world record level ultra marathon on basically 0 carbs, because he's become so well fat adapted that becomes a really super efficient fuel source, so that when you're running 100 miles, like now you're using your fat stores to fuel you. So it's a really interesting kind of case study of how people have now been shifting back to more of this primal way of
eating. Yeah, that's right.
So.
That's right. All right, guys. Well, look, that's about all we got time for today. What I'm going to do, we always do a weekend flash sale, which will start tomorrow. I'm going to make sure that we bundle it with our nutrition program, because the nutrition program is an introduction to this concept. It's we have a progressive nutrition program that we provide our guys here, which helps introduce things like time-restricted eating, things like carb deloads. Working towards better metabolic flexibility is the goal for the nutrition program. It's not a specific one-size-fits-all diet. I'm not a big fan of diets. I'm just a fan of experimenting and finding what works for you, but along the way working towards a goal of becoming more metabolically flexible. So whatever we do tomorrow, I'm going to make sure that the guys bundle that nutrition program in with the flash sale. If you want to grab it and take a look at it, and we'll see you tomorrow. We're going to be talking about running injuries tomorrow. Phil's going to be on the show, and it's going to be a good one, because we're going to be talking about how to avoid common running injuries. We gave you a little bit of a hint today. Other than that, yeah.
Good times, noodle salad.
Thanks, everyone. See you tomorrow. Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, it's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's
far.
the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.